Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. On today's episode, we have Chris Peters on to get jiggy with it when we talk about Will Smith. So we have a Will Smith breakdown, talk about his strengths, his weaknesses, why he's such an intriguing prospect, and where he would fit in the Sharks prospect pool. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at Fear the Fin, RIP, and San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch this on YouTube as well. And we have Chris Peters on from Flo Hockey to discuss Will Smith. Nice to have Chris on. I had him on a couple years ago. Wasn't able to get him on recently, but it was nice to get him on to kind of talk about Will Smith and where kind of what makes him such an intriguing prospect. And looking at his point production is absolutely insane and kind of under talked about, honestly. So before though we get into my conversation with Chris, do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you guys by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And now we bring in the senior content creator of Flo Hockey, Chris Peters. Chris, welcome back to Locked On Sharks. It's been a while since you've been on the show, but how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, JD. It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So we're going to have you on to talk about Will Smith, who I think is one of a very intriguing prospect in this year's draft. Before we get into kind of Will Smith's strengths and weaknesses and get to know more about Will's game, do you want to kind of introduce him to the audience? So Will Smith, a center for the U.S. national team, 6 foot, 172 pounds, and 36 games this year. He has 28 goals, 41 assists, and 107 shots on goal. And he's considered probably the best prospect on this team heading into this year. So what makes why is everyone getting jiggy with Will Smith this year?
I haven't heard that one before.
I'm sure you have not.
So, I think the reason that there's a lot of excitement about Will Smith, it starts with his progression from last season. He played on the under-18 team, got called up, and was part of their team at the World Under-18 Championship, which obviously is a big accomplishment for any U17 player. But he was kind of down their lineup, didn't necessarily play a ton, didn't have a huge impact on that under-18 World Championship. He comes into this year and really from the outset, highly productive, points all over the place. And now he's averaging close to 2 points a game. There is one player in the history of the NTDP that has averaged 2 points a game over the course of an entire season in their under-18 year, and that's Jack Hughes. And so, the fact that Will Smith is kind of in this rarefied air in terms of his production is a big reason why he's up there. The other thing is he's gotten a little bit stronger. He grew a little bit in the offseason as well. He's closer to 6 foot. He's not necessarily the strongest physically yet, but he's got room to fill out. And then, he's just incredibly skilled. The vision is outstanding. He's part of, this incredible line with Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault at the NTDP that is, probably the best 1 through 3 line in all of junior hockey. The way that those guys kind of work together. And Gabe Perreault is actually also close to 2 points a game at the NTDP and he's been on an incredible tear lately. But I think that, in terms of pro and NHL upside, Will Smith on that team has the most to offer, I think, in terms of upside. And that's a big reason why I think there's a lot of people that are excited about him. When you have the skill level that he does, when you have the hockey sense that he does, and then you put that into basically a guy that's executing at an incredibly high level, it makes it really, it makes a guy pop. And so we're talking about Will Smith right now as a top 5, top 7 type pick in this draft. We're talking about him just as being on just barely on the outside of that that tier that includes Carlson, Michkov, Bedard, and Fantilli. So if you're that next tier, and Will Smith is in that tier, that's still a really good place to be.
Yeah, and I think that kind of also speaks to the depth of this draft, right? Where Fantilli would be the number one pick in most drafts if there wasn't a guy named Connor Bedard floating around. And, Leo Carlson could be a number one pick in a lot of drafts as well. So, again, having a guy who's in that same tier as these, kind of knocking on the door of that same type of tier in Will Smith is, kind of exciting spot for the Sharks fans who are right now. I think they're kind of fifth in the Tankathon standings, and, you get some bad luck, you could be picking seventh, or if maybe you get some good luck, you're able to jump up. But what kind of, you talk about like his production, stuff like that. What's the one kind of translatable skill with him where you're like, okay, I can see this working in the NHL with him?
I think it's his distribution ability is he navigates the ice incredibly well. And then he finds guys especially well. Like, he creates a lot of space for himself. That's harder to do at the NHL level. It's a lot harder to do at the NHL level. But it is something that I think, in particular, he has got, the opportunity to do. And then, his vision and his ability to distribute. Those are things that I think he processes the game at such a speed that he'll continue to be able to do that at the NHL level. I think that the thing about him is he's also good with carrying pucks into the zone, being a threat once they're in the offensive zone. And a lot of that, I think, comes back to the fact that he's such a high-end distributor. And there are going to be passes that he makes this year that he certainly won't be able to make in the NHL, yes. but there's a lot that he does that are just the simple, right, correct play. And he identifies it so frequently. So, I think that's a really, really positive thing for him.
All right. And then, of course, right, there's stuff that he needs to work on. So what do you think is the one glaring thing that he's going to have to improve on as he continues to develop and, head towards the NHL?
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing is probably just physical strength, which it is for so many guys. But I think, he's kind of a lankier player, so he needs to tack on more muscle and some more weight.
You mean a 17-year-old kid isn't full ability?
Yeah, right. But I mean, some more than others.
Some are, yes.
And I think he's in that category where he's grown. He's still growing into his body and into his frame. But I think that he is, as he matures here, just continuing to get stronger and harder to knock off the puck. I mean, he's already hard to knock off the puck because he's so shifty. But, to make sure that he's battling. And the strength also would help him in the defensive elements of the game, which, I don't think that, I wouldn't necessarily call him a true two-way center, right? And I think there's absolutely some teams out there that think he's a wing. And I think part of that is because of, the defensive elements of his game are not as strong. I think that with strength, I would rather have him in the middle. I want him to have the puck as much as possible. If he's on my team, I think he's a top 6 guy all day, with the potential to be, even a top line player at the NHL level if everything goes right. So, but you have to have better defensive capabilities in order to do that, because if the points ever dry up, you have to be able to do other things. And I think that Will Smith does that. I'm not concerned about his competitiveness. I'm not concerned. I've heard from scouts that think he's a little bit on the softer side. I haven't seen that really. I think he engages physically. I think he does all those things. It's just right now he's not quite strong enough to execute those plays at a high enough level. The other thing with that too is just playing in the interior. That's one thing where, like an Adam Fantilli is miles ahead of him in that regard. But also, I still think that Will Smith has shown a desire to play more within the middle and not to the perimeter, which is last year, I think, was what it was. He was way outside a lot. And that's this year. The reason he's more effective is because he is getting inside more.
All right. Before we continue with Chris and we get into kind of Will Smith and where he kind of fits in the draft, where he fits in the Sharks prospect pool, his kind of timeline to being an NHL type of player, do want to take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at Athletic Greens. Right now, new year, new me. You want to take care of your gut health, have more energy, optimize your immune system, but you don't want to take a bunch of pills and vitamins. That's where Athletic Greens comes in. With one scoop of their delicious AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole foods, source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to get your day started right. Great thing about it, though, is the cost. For less than $3 a day, it's investing in your health, and it's cheaper than going to get coffee every day, if you're like me. Also, it's cheaper than going to the store and buying all the vitamins yourself. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews. They're trusted by professional athletes. So they're going to make it really easy. Go to athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Get you a free 1-year supply of their immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs for your first purchase. Again, just visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Yeah, and you speak about his defensive, I don't want to say issues, but that's, something he needs to work on. And, especially with USNTDP, where it feels like that's very much something that they harp on, right? Is those like playing in your own zone before and then working out from there. You kind of see all those guys kind of, like Bordelot and all these other players who've come out of the program where, you have to start in your own zone. And, do you think that it's something, again, it's just once he kind of gets bigger and adds on and with most players, right, is just more and more experience working in your own zone. That's something, again, maybe not be a full two-way, but he's not going to be a liability in his own zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing this year is like they have the puck all the time, so there really there isn't a lot of time to spend. Like it's just like, they really do that. That line dominates pretty much every shift they're out there. I mean, the fact that Gabe Perreault and Will Smith are putting up roughly 3 to 4 points a game, it seems, against USHL competition, even against some of the Division I colleges. It's incredible. But it is. I mean, at the NTDP, they want the players to leave much more, well-rounded. They don't want to have one-dimensional players. And, I think interestingly enough, like in the years, like the Jack Hughes years, that line, that group was just so talented that they just basically were like, just go, do what you do. I think, with this particular under 18 team and Dan Muse being the head coach there, he's coached in the NHL as an assistant with the Predators, coached the USHL level, coached the collegiate level at Yale, where, definitely two-way hockey is very important. And I think that he's, that's a big key for him is like, you had 4 points, but we also, gave up like 5 scoring chances. That's not going to be acceptable. So I do think that that's helped. And it'll just, it'll continue to help. And they'll get again, when Will Smith goes to Boston College next year, same situation, former NHL assistant coach and Greg Brown, a former USHL head coach, and a guy that's been at the collegiate game for a long time. You're going to have to play a good, solid two-way hockey, but they're also not going to, and I think this is true at the NTDP, they're not going to, have you change your identity just for the sake of a couple of extra defensive stops. They want you to play skilled. They want you to, find the balance essentially. And for a lot of players, that's just a matter of reps and taking time. I think that's really what it comes down to.
That goes back into my defenses for nerds. Just go play fun hockey.
yeah, exactly. If you have the best defense is having the puck.
If you have the puck, you don't have to play defense, right? The Eric Carlson, that's why Eric Carlson's so good.
Amen.
All right. So you mentioned he's going to Boston College, right? What's kind of the timeline for him to be an impact player in the NHL? So we were kind of seeing a little bit more kind of, I don't want to say one and dones, but we're seeing kind of guys cutting their college career short to make that jump. You look like guys going to be a top 5, potentially top 5, definitely a top 10 type of pick. What do you think is his kind of timeline?
Well, interestingly enough, I think in the last couple of years, the trendier thing is to stay that extra year for your sophomore year. So it actually, I think, you're starting to see more players spend 2 years. There are a lot. There are fewer one and dones and a lot of two and dones right now. But like I think that Will Smith is on a very similar path to Trevor Zegras. I think that, that's to me, having seen both of those guys at the NTDP and what they were able to do, that's that I see a lot of Zegras with Smith. He doesn't have that outward flamboyance and just kind of like bravado.
Yeah.
But he's got all the skill. He has all of that skill. A lot of the things that Trevor Zegras can do, Will Smith can do. I think he's one of the most dynamic players in this draft, period. So I think Bedard is on another level.
Yeah, Bedard's,
but, Michkov does it with his mind more than his skill. Carlson more with his size, Fantilli more with speed and strength. whereas Smith is just dynamic and does it, with both his hockey sense and his creativity. So, and with that, Trevor Zegras was a one and done. Went to Boston University, so on the other side of town, and then moved on to the Ducks organization. But then he had to spend time in the AHL. They wanted to get him more used to playing center at that level. And I think, the thing about Will Smith is he will play center at Boston College next season. He'll probably be there, depending on what Cutter Gauthier does. If he comes back, then Cutter Gauthier is probably their number one center and Will Smith's their number two center. And then that may also say, okay, well, let him stay one more year to be the guy after Cutter Gauthier is gone. So I think the conservative estimate for him is that he's a 2-year collegiate player. But I do, he's not going straight from the NTDP to the NHL. I can guarantee you that much. That's happened once, and it was Jack Hughes. And even then, you could make the case that may not have been the right move at the time. But with hindsight being what it is, if that was going to accelerate Jack Hughes to get where he is right now,
it worked out.
Decision, right? So, so I think that, but we'll see Will Smith go to college and stay at least the 1 year. He is a Mass native too. So it kind of is, being at home and having that opportunity after these couple of years at the NTDP. So I think that that he's probably 2 years away from, at a minimum, 2 years away from being an NHL contributor.
Well, we know David Quinn, Mike Greer, both are Boston College guys, so they're probably already taken Will Smith off the board if he's going to Boston University. But
no.
if the Sharks do draft him, where does he kind of fit into their prospect pool? You have guys like William Eklund, who's going to be should be making the NHL next year. Bordelot, like, where does he kind of fit along with the rest of the guys?
Yeah, I mean, he'd be their number one prospect, I think, by a fairly clear margin. I think what we've seen with William Eklund is, I was a huge William Eklund fan in his draft year. I remain a believer in what he's going to be able to do long term. I think that, as much as I like him, I think Will Smith has he's a better skater. He's a more dynamic thinker of the game, even though I thought William Eklund has tremendous creativity and has done a lot of really cool things. But like Thomas Bordelot, same deal. Like, he's an incredibly intelligent hockey player. So that's the interesting thing that the Sharks are going to have to decide. Do they go with the more dynamic player who maybe doesn't have that physical strength, or, the interesting thing about that range where Will Smith is, you've got other guys around him like Zach Benson, who is similarly dynamic, not as good a skater, not quite as big. There's a lot of talk about the rise of Oliver Moore, who's more of a two-way center, who has better defensive capabilities and is the best skater in this entire draft. But then you also think about Philip Bystedt and the step that he's taken this year, and that you've got a big guy that can play down the middle. So I think that there's a lot of different things that you have to consider. But to me, Will Smith, and that just shows you how good the top of this draft class is. I think after you get outside of the top 10, it gets closer to your average draft after that. I think that, the top 4 is elite. The next tier is like 4 through 8 is really, really good. And I still think, like, if you're picking them that 5, 6, 7 range, you have an opportunity still to grab, a potential number one prospect for your pool.
All right, guys, before we finish up with Chris, we talk about some bigger NHL draft things. We talk about why there's not that kind of number one defenseman out there. Is it the lack of talent, or is it just because all the forwards are really good? But before we do that, do let you know about our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, it's Super Bowl week, and the only app that you need for your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the number one sportsbook in America, FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get to $3,000 back on bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel will let you bet on anything from money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. Again, Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown. I just picture it in my mind. So FanDuel Sportsbook is a safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's talk some kind of bigger draft stuff. So, you kind of mentioned the top class, and this draft kind of already feels like we know who's probably going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe some order switching here, but it's going to be Bedard 1, it's Fantilli 2, probably Carlson 3, maybe Mitchkov.
And maybe, I think Mitchkov's a real wild card. We have no real clear plan on what'll happen with him, just given everything, Russia,
everything,
and it's all contract related,
and especially because again, we're probably not seeing him for a while, but you're expecting a finished product when he eventually jumps over. But who's the one guy kind of out of the top 4 that you think is could be a big splash on draft day, where it's whoa, we didn't see this coming, as a potential maybe top 5 through 10 pick?
Interesting.
I know we're very, very far away from the draft still, but
I think it's still very much to be determined. The one guy that I think is making a pretty significant push that's getting a lot more attention is Oliver Moore. And he's playing on the second line, so he's not part of that group with Smith and Leonard and Perreault, and yet he's still producing. You look at the top 4 producers on that team, that includes Moore, who's 4th. And it's a pretty dramatic drop off after those 4 guys in terms of the point production. And with Moore being the best skater in this draft, with the fact that he took such a gigantic step physically from last year, is physically strong, has defensive capabilities. He's a guy that I think teams are starting to really hone in on as the season is progressing here. And so that is definitely a guy to keep an eye on. I still think, guys like Zach Benson have a real opportunity here to be part of that top 5 conversation. He's just scored a highlight reel goal.
That goal was insane.
The night before we record this. And the other thing about him is he might not be big, but he's ultra competitive. He's got a tremendous defensive stick. He takes pucks off people like I haven't seen. And so it's really impressive to see him do that. And so I think that's another guy where oh, okay, well that makes a lot of sense as a guy that, we should consider in this range. But beyond that, I think there's a lot of question marks. I think there's a lot of different things. When is the first defenseman going to go? When is the first goaltender going to go? Are we going to have one or more first round draft picks of goalies? It's a lot of it is up in the air. And I think that, it only takes one team to really disrupt the entire thing.
We're looking at you, Senators.
Exactly.
Sorry, had to get that in there.
But I think that's kind of a lot remains to be seen. So I'm interested to see kind of where everything stands. As we kind of get into April more, and we start getting to the postseason, that's when you start saying, okay, who's really making that push? And I think it could be a defenseman. I think guys like David Reinbacher and Axel Sandin Pellikka, if you have big years at the end of the year, and continue to deliver on what you showed throughout the season and took the next step, I do think that there's a chance that some of those guys are going to really leap up in the range of potential top 10 guys.
Why is it with the defensemen? Is it just because the forwards are so good, or is there just the defensemen there isn't? Last year you had a bunch of guys kind of like Korchinski, et cetera, kind of floating around the top 10. Is it just that the defense class isn't as good this year, or is it just because the forwards are so elite?
I just think that the forwards are so elite, and then the defense is closer to average. There isn't a Simon Nemec or David Juracek in this year's class.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a Keandre Miller, a guy the second half, like a David Reinbacher or something like that, where, I think I think the Moritz Seider year was another year where we're kind of I don't know which defensemen are gonna go, and
that worked out for them.
And he's awesome, So
yeah.
So I think that it's all cyclical. Next year's defense draft class looks amazing. So at least early, we've talked. We always put the next draft class on a pedestal. Like the Shane Wright year was going to be such a big year, and then we got to the draft class. We're like, yeah, it's kind of not great.
Yeah.
And then that even at the top, and then this year, obviously Bedard skews the entire look, but then you also see there are a lot of other players that are playing big roles. But next year, you've got some real interesting guys that are, the OHL has a number of young defensemen that look outstanding at 16. The USHL has Artem Levshunov, who's a Belarusian player that is a massive human and just incredibly intelligent. And, I was like, man, he's got a chance. Like he'll be in the conversation for number one next year, I think. But yeah, so if you're looking for defense
next year,
be worse next year, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. The Sharks will be plenty bad next year as well, too. So, all right, I'm going to get you out of here on these last two. So, right now, picking today, we're recording this February 2nd. Will Smith goes where in the draft?
I haven't, I'll say that I'm going to say I think he'll go fifth.
Fifth?
Yeah. And I hedged that saying I think he'll go fifth, and I think he'll go before Michkov.
Oh,
that's
I like
my
that.
hot take, I guess.
That's fun. That's fun. Okay. And then last question. 5 years from now, I'm still doing this podcast. I have you on. We're going to talk about the best player in this draft that's not named Connor Bedard. Who is it?
I certainly think Adam Fantilli has the best chance. If I'm going to put it, if we're really doing this exercise and it's not anybody other than Connor Bedard, it's going to have to be the guy that's number 2 on my list. Okay. Otherwise, I'm not very good at this, which I may not be anyway. So, no, but I think that what we're seeing, Adam Fantilli, as of right now, he is tied for the NCAA scoring lead as a freshman. He is averaging a higher points per game rate than Jack Eichel did in his Hobey Baker season. He is averaging close to Kyle Connor's draft freshman season numbers, and that was after he was drafted. And he somehow didn't win the Hobey Baker that year, Jimmy Vesey. But anyway, I do think that Fantilli, from the size, the speed, his hockey sense, his skill set, his ability to score, I think that he has all of the tools of being a potential number 1 center in the NHL. I think that's probably, and before the World Juniors, we were at least having the conversation hey, maybe we're not going to have that conversation for the rest of the year. But what he's doing at college, this season has so many rhymes to the McDavid Eichel season. Mm-hmm. And Jack Eichel was the best college freshman I had ever seen. And now Adam Fantilli is making a case for that. So I was too young. I was 9 when Paul Carrillo had 100 points as a freshman. So I wasn't around for that. But everything else, I think Adam Fantilli is having an exceptional season. And just because Connor Bedard is having a super,
he's in his own galaxy.
Just a galaxy far, far away season. Don't lose sight of the fact that what Adam Fantilli is doing is exceptionally rare and should be appreciated as such.
All right, Chris, you've said it all. Where can the people find you, and what do you got coming up next?
Yeah, so all of my content for everything is at flohockey.tv. I will have new draft rankings coming out in February. Hopefully a top 50. We'll see if that's possible. I'm still working through a lot of video and also a lot of live viewings, but that's where my draft rankings will be. My podcast is Talking Hockey Sense, which is available wherever you get podcasts. It is available on YouTube, and it's also available on Flo Hockey on the app as well. So a lot of different ways to engage with that. Follow at Flo Hockey 2 on Twitter and stuff like that, so that you can see what we're up to. Got a lot going, just a lot. There's a lot happening. And it's
that
fun
time
to be
of
a
year.
part of. Yeah. So, but definitely just getting started over there. So plenty more to come, and we'll have a lot of great draft coverage this year too.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Hey, my pleasure, JD. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Chris. Will Smith, I think if the Sharks miss out on one of those top 5 picks, or even with that 5th pick, Will Smith feels like a really, really intriguing prospect right now. I know there's still a lot of time between now and the actual draft, but feels like Will Smith could be one of those guys that we're talking about. Like, how did he go 7th or 8th or 9th or whatever he goes in a couple years? So enjoyed my conversation with Chris. Going to try to have him back on here in a couple weeks and a month or so. Don't want to bring on the guys too quickly. Want to kind of have some nice breathing room before we have repeat guests. So, but fun conversation with Chris. Always enjoy talking to him. So thank you, Chris. Make sure you guys go checking out his work at Flo Hockey as well. Be back tomorrow. We actually have games again starting up. So yeah, I'll be back tomorrow to cover that and then get you guys ready for that. We're going to, have some fun heading into the, as we start to get into trade deadline season here. So make sure you're following along. You follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole. You can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can listen wherever you get podcasts. And of course, watch this on YouTube as well. Until tomorrow, bye, friends.